the best of it is that our time initially, when the whole thing was opening up, was there were no charts, there were no maps.
Robert Plant, the golden voice of Led Zeppelin, did not come from a glamorous or easy background. He was born into a family that was caught between two very different worlds. His father, Robert C. Plant, was a civil engineer, a man of order, numbers, and security. He had worked hard to build a career in post-war Britain, even helping with runway construction during World War II. His dream was for his son to follow a stable path, to become a respected professional like an accountant, which in those days was seen as a secure and honorable career. On the other side was Robert's mother, Annie Celia Kane, who came from Romany roots. She carried with her the traditions of mysticism, folklore, and the wandering spirit of outsiders. These two influences his father's order and his mother's. Mystery pulled Robert in opposite directions while he was still very young. Growing up in the Black Country of England, a place filled with soot, factories, and hard lives, Robert often felt trapped between these two paths. His father's world was strict and predictable, while his mother's heritage gave him a sense of imagination and freedom. This tension became one of the earliest struggles of his life. His parents wanted him to follow a safe and respectable future, but he was already dreaming of something much bigger, even though he could not yet put it into words. As Robert grew into his teenage years, the conflict with his parents only deepened. While his father wanted him to focus on education, Robert had already fallen in love with something that consumed him completely: the blues. Through artists like Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Sonny Boy Williamson, Robert discovered a world of raw emotion, pain, and longing that spoke to his own restless soul. He spent hours in his room, locked away with rare imported records that he bought from a small Birmingham shop. For him, the blues was not just music, it was a way of life. At 16, while studying at King Edward VI Grammar School, he realized he could not live the life his parents had planned. Subjects like Latin and mathematics felt meaningless compared to the thrilling sound of blues. Feeling like a square peg in a round hole, Robert made a decision that shocked his family. He left school with only a few basic qualifications. To his parents, this was a betrayal of everything they had sacrificed for. To Robert, it was freedom. He left home soon after, barely surviving by sleeping on the floors of friends and taking odd jobs like laying tarmac on roads. It was a tough life, but it hardened him and deepened his passion. Even while working grueling manual jobs, his nights were always about music. His girlfriend, Maureen Wilson, supported him emotionally and financially during this difficult time, giving him the stability he needed to chase what looked like an impossible dream. The first steps into music after leaving school and home behind, Robert Plant entered a difficult but important stage of his life. With little money and almost no support from his parents, he had to depend on his determination to survive. During this period, he joined small local bands and slowly began carving out his reputation as a singer. In 1966, he became part of a group called Band of Joy, which included another young talent, drummer John Bonham. Though they played mainly in pubs and small clubs for very little money, their chemistry on stage was undeniable. Robert's wild stage presence, long blonde hair, and raw voice earned him the nickname the Wild Man of Blues from the Black Country. Audiences could sense that he was something special, even if record companies did not yet agree. Band of Joy never secured a record deal, which was frustrating, but the experience toughened him. He learned how to command a stage, how to connect with an audience, and most importantly, he built a friendship with John Bonham that would change both of their lives forever. During this time, Robert was still barely surviving, often earning less than £20 a week, but he didn't give up, because he believed in his dream more than anything else. His girlfriend, Maureen, who later became his wife, stood by him, providing not just emotional strength but also practical help. When money was tight, these early years may have been filled with hardship, but they were also laying the foundation for one of the greatest careers in rock history. In the summer of 1968, Robert's life took a dramatic turn. Guitarist Jimmy Page, who had been part of the Yardbirds, suddenly found himself without a band, but with contracts for concerts that still needed to be fulfilled. Page was desperate to form a new group quickly, and he needed a singer who could bring something extraordinary. At first, Page wanted singer Terry Reid, but Reid turned him down and instead suggested Robert Plant. At the time, Robert was only 20 years old and struggling to survive as a musician. But Page decided to take the drive from London to Birmingham to watch him perform with a small local group. What Page witnessed left him stunned. Robert sang with such range, power, and emotion that Page immediately knew he had found the right singer. Soon after, the two met at Page's home, where they spent the night sharing blues records and performing songs together. The connection was instant. Robert introduced Page to his friend John Bonham, and soon bassist and keyboardist John Paul Jones also joined. Within weeks, the lineup of what would become Led Zeppelin was complete. The name came from a joke that the band would go down like a lead balloon, but they changed the spelling and turned it into a brand that would reshape music forever. For Robert, who had been nearly broke just weeks before, this was the turning point he had been waiting for. By 1969, Led Zeppelin released their first album, and the impact was immediate. Their mix of blues, hard rock, and mystical lyrics captured audiences around the world. Robert's voice became the centerpiece, high, wild, and emotional, unlike anything listeners had ever heard. His stage presence, with flowing hair, open shirts, and dramatic movements, created the image of a golden god, a phrase that fans and media soon used to describe him. Songs like Dazed and Confused, Whole Lotta Love, and later Stairway to Heaven became anthems of a generation. In just a few years, Zeppelin went from playing clubs to selling out the biggest stadiums in the world. By the early 1970s, they were considered the biggest rock band on the planet, earning millions of dollars and breaking records wherever they went. But with fame also came chaos. Stories of wild parties, excess, and scandal followed the band everywhere. Robert, who had once been the dreamer chasing blues records in his bedroom, was now living a life beyond imagination. Yet even during the peak of success, his personal life remained important to him. He married Maureen Wilson in 1968, and together they had 3 children. Robert even wrote the heartfelt song Thank You for Her, showing that behind the rock star image, there was also a man deeply connected to his family. However, Robert Plant's life was never just about fame and glory. Alongside success came some of the deepest personal tragedies. In 1975, while on vacation with his family, Robert was involved in a terrible car accident. He suffered severe injuries that left him in a wheelchair for months, and his wife Maureen was badly hurt as well. The accident forced the band to cancel an entire tour, costing them millions. But even worse, tragedy struck 2 years later. In 1977, during a Led Zeppelin tour in the United States, Robert received devastating news. His 5-year-old son, Carrick, had suddenly fallen ill and passed away from a rare infection. Robert was thousands of miles away and could not make it home in time to say goodbye. The pain was unbearable. He shut himself away, questioning whether he could ever sing or perform again. Many thought he would leave music completely. It was only through the support of John Bonham, his closest friend, that he slowly returned to the stage. Out of this grief, he later wrote All My Love, one of Led Zeppelin's most emotional songs, as a tribute to his son. This period changed him completely. The man once seen as the wild golden god of rock now carried the deep sadness of a father who had lost his child. In 1980, Robert faced another devastating blow with the death of John Bonham. Bonham, his longtime friend and bandmate, died at just 32 after a night of heavy drinking. His loss shattered the band. For Robert, it was not just the end of Led Zeppelin, but also the loss of one of the most important people in his life. Within weeks, the band officially announced they could not continue without Bonham. For Robert, it meant starting over. The offers to reunite were enormous at one point. They were offered hundreds of millions of dollars to reform, but Robert refused. He felt it would not be right without Bonham. Instead, he began to explore a solo career. At first, Many doubted he could succeed outside of Zeppelin's shadow. But his first album, Pictures at 11 in 1982, proved otherwise. It was well received, and, with help from Phil Collins on drums, Robert showed the world that his voice and spirit were still strong. Still, despite the success, he carried the scars of loss and grief, which influenced his music and the quieter, more reflective tone of his later work. Now at 76, Robert Plant lives a much simpler life than the one he once had. Despite being worth around $200 million, he has chosen not to live in luxury mansions or chase the spotlight. Instead, he spends much of his time in Worcestershire, England. Close to his roots, he attends local football games, supports community charities, and still performs occasionally with his band Saving Grace. Unlike many rock stars of his era who live surrounded by wealth and attention, Plant prefers quiet routines and staying connected to ordinary life. Some fans see this as sad, considering he once ruled the biggest stages in the world. Others see it as a man who has found peace after decades of chaos, loss, and constant change. What cannot be denied is that his life has been filled with both extraordinary highs and heartbreaking lows. From the glory of Stairway to Heaven to the unbearable pain of losing his son, Robert Plant has lived through it all. Today, he may no longer be the golden god of rock, but he remains a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the power of music to heal. After decades of living through the storm of fame, tragedy, and endless travel, Robert Plant began to look for peace in the later chapters of his life. The wild parties and huge stadium shows of the 1970s were long behind him, and he no longer desired that kind of attention. Instead, he wanted to live in a way that allowed him to feel normal again. He bought a modest home in the English countryside, not too far from where he grew up. There, he surrounded himself with close friends, family, and nature. Unlike many rock legends who retire into luxury, Robert preferred the simple things: gardening, long walks, and spending time in local pubs. He often said in interviews that he had already lived the dream and now wanted to experience the quiet side of life. He was also very active in supporting local causes, such as raising money for Wolverhampton Wanderers, his beloved football club, and other community projects. This grounded lifestyle surprised some fans, especially those who still saw him as the golden god of rock. But to Robert, it was a conscious choice. He knew the price of fame all too well: the loss, the loneliness, and the constant pressure, and he no longer wanted to chase that. For him, peace was more valuable than attention, and quiet happiness was better than global headlines. One of the biggest struggles in Robert Plant's life has been his relationship with the legacy of Led Zeppelin. On one hand, it was the band that made him world famous and gave him the platform to share his music with millions. On the other, it also tied him forever to a time filled with both glory and deep sorrow. After Zeppelin ended in 1980, Robert was constantly asked if he would reunite with Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones. Over the years, offers poured in, some of them worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but Robert almost always said no. To him, Led Zeppelin ended with John Bonham's death, and bringing it back without him felt wrong. He did agree to rare one-off shows, like the famous 2007 reunion concert at the O2 Arena in London, which was widely praised as a magical moment. But he quickly stepped back again, refusing to turn it into a full tour. This choice frustrated many fans, who longed to see Zeppelin live one more time, but Robert was firm. He didn't want to become a nostalgia act, living off the past. Instead of creating new things, he preferred moving forward, exploring fresh collaborations and sounds, even if they were less commercially successful. This decision shows his integrity as an artist. He chose growth and authenticity over easy money, proving that for him, music was always about the journey, not just the fame. Robert Plant's impact on rock music cannot be overstated. His voice, with its wide range and emotional power, became the standard for rock singers after him. Countless artists, from Freddie Mercury of Queen to Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses, were inspired by Plant's style. The way he combined blues roots with rock energy and mystical lyrics set the blueprint for generations of performers.